Well, we all know that the response to the coronavirus pandemic here by the powers that be in the United States has been, at best, lacking. Whether it's incompetence or neglect, could be both. Not could be, it almost certainly is both when we look at what's really happened here over the past few months, where the Trump White House has either minimized the COVID-19 pandemic or tried to score propaganda points against China. I mean, at one point, Trump actually said this was a hoax. Now, the one thing they did not do was do anything at all to get ready. Now, even now, 3 months after we've learned of the coronavirus outbreak here, the U.S. is lagging behind every single other country in the world, just about, in terms of the response and not taking any responsibility for being terrible. For instance, here's President Trump on the lack of testing kits.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that? And when can you guarantee that every single American who needs a test will be able to have a test? What's the date of that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all, because we were given a set of circumstances, and we were given rules, regulations, and specifications from a different time.
Now, I'm not really sure what mythical past President Trump is talking about here, but in the real world, Trump and the broader government actually deliberately chose not to stockpile COVID-19 tests for 6 weeks as the news of the virus dominated headlines around the world. Deliberately chose. They could have had millions of tests from the World Health Organization and just didn't do it. So in other words, there was plenty of time to help ease the testing burden, which of course would have helped to save lives, quite frankly. And this lack of testing has been a major reason why we're in the situation we are now, with the virus spreading extremely rapidly here in the US. And Trump, by the way, isn't the only one who's not taking responsibility for this. Vice President Pence, who allegedly is over top of this whole response issue here, and the head of the CDC are both refusing to even say who made these disastrous decisions. So certainly not saying the buck stops there, just passing the buck around to whoever they can get. It's like a game of hot potato here. And we also know that in addition to not preparing for the test, they didn't prepare vis-a-vis the critical equipment issue either. Now, I think you've certainly heard by now that ICU beds, ventilators, all sorts of associated equipment there, we have big shortages, severe shortages in fact. Including an emergency government stockpile, there's roughly 72,000 ventilators nationwide and about 100,000 ICU beds. But looking at just the moderate outlook here now, as it concerns the spread of the virus, anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million people could need some form of hospitalization, and thus will need some of this equipment. And that's on top of all the people who are already hospitalized for things that have nothing to do with the coronavirus, who of course have to be completely separated from those with coronavirus, but also can't just be thrown out on the street here. They still need care. A glimpse into the future, perhaps, for many different places is what's already happening in Seattle, which has been at the epicenter of the pandemic here in the US, that nearly all the ICU beds in the city are already in use. This is not some podunk town here. This is Seattle. This is a major American city. Now, let me just give you the overview once again. We will, at the best case, minimally need 100,000 ICU beds with all the attendant equipment. And at worst, we could need 2 million of these beds and all the attendant equipment. If not, that means that nurses and doctors are going to have to end up rationing care and equipment and deciding who gets life-saving treatment and who dies. That's the real situation we are in right here. And looking at the next month, you'd think that even though the government is behind the 8 ball, they'd be moving a lot faster to try to get up to speed here, using all the emergency powers of all sorts wherever they can find them, making new laws if they have to make sure that we have these things. Go on a war footing, some may say. In fact, many people are saying this. And they're saying it because we've done it before, at least we've seen it before, 7 decades ago, during the Second World War, when all sorts of production was shifted to a war footing. It's things like telling refrigerator manufacturers to move into making machine guns. Here's a look.
One machine gun, a deadly weapon. The 250,000. It may not seem strange that a factory should produce 250,000 machine guns. And the quantity production of 2 different types of propellers in one factory may not seem unusual. In addition to quantity production of hydraulic aircraft controls and many other kinds of war products. That is what factories are for, to produce things. The strange thing is that only a short time before, these factories were producers of electric refrigerators, the world's largest.
Now, of course, in this crisis, we don't need machine guns, we need ventilators, we need ICU beds, we need medical staff, we need other equipment, but the principle remains the same. We have shortages of things we absolutely need to keep people from dying. We have the ability to make them. We just have to go ahead and push it forward. And in fact, this authority is on the table. It's called the Defense Production Act. The government actually has the ability to do many, many things, but certainly the things we've already been mentioned, if it's related to the national defense. The government actually has the ability to suspend any contract in any factory and direct it to produce the necessary goods. They also can make grants directly to those businesses and guarantee any loan to make sure that all of this production is possible. Now, just to underscore this, the act, and I'm going to quote here a little bit from it, gives the president the power to allocate materials, services, and facilities as they deem necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense. And just in case you're wondering here, national defense includes, according to the definitions in the act itself, emergency preparedness activities conducted pursuant to Title VI of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. And that, of course, may sound familiar to you because it is the Stafford Act, which was the authority that the Trump administration used when it declared a national emergency in relationship to the coronavirus pandemic. So, you understand this correctly. We could be going out of our way to produce masks, test kits, ICU beds, and all sorts of equipment, ventilators, whatever else we need, basically, we could be moving quickly to produce it and saving people's lives because of that. But instead, we've got this. And it's not just Trump who needs to take responsibility. It's the big manufacturers who are dragging their feet. I mean, I haven't seen any of these companies that could or are making these things. General Motors isn't falling all over itself to say, how do we retool to employ people to make ventilators? It's the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies that are still not guaranteeing free treatment and free medicine, which obviously is going to be a major reason why people don't seek care, the fear of the high cost. It's the whole healthcare system that leaves 87 million people uninsured and underinsured, and which has systematically cut back on public hospitals and infrastructure for decades to ensure their own profitability. It's also the US Congress that has a bill, and we mentioned this earlier in the show, but just to reiterate here, this is unbelievable. A bill that supposedly rectifies the issues around guaranteed paid sick leave, but in fact leaves 80% of workers without guaranteed paid sick leave on the grounds that, and I'm quoting Nancy Pelosi here, big corporations should already be providing it. Although the fact of the matter is they are not providing it, and certainly they should be named and shamed for something that's so cruel and detrimental to public health. But the fact that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats would just say, well, they're not doing it, so we won't do anything, is criminal in and of itself. So no doubt the people of this country are going to have some reckoning with their politicians over the years to come. We, as a society, will be reckoning with the realities of this for-profit system that left us so unprepared for years to come. But for now, for today, we have to have action, and we have to have it now.